And it's Friday, May 28th. You are here at Litvak Leadership Live, and I'm here with my new friend and fraternity brother, my brother from another mother, and probably a much younger mother looking at him, Jacob Sager.
She'd love to. She's so happy that you said that, and I'm sure she's watching right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I don't think my mother watches this, so... and I would know if she was, because of course guilt would be coming through on the comments. So Jacob, welcome to Litvak Leadership Live. How you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. It's kind of a rainy day here in Austin, but I'm good. It's Friday. I'm happy. I got no complaints. Everyone's out of the house right now, so nobody would be here to listen to it.
No kids, no dogs barking, no nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
And usually I got 4 kids and they're all out.
Woo! Okay, so we're going to make one quick change. If everyone notices, our names are in boxes, but Jacob is the salad grape guy. And since those are round, we're going with round names today. We're going to change our branding just a little bit. Let me throw this up here to do some housekeeping stuff. Hey, you should be liking Litvak Leadership on Facebook and on YouTube. Now, you may say, why, Sean? Do I need to like both of them? Well, because different things appear on each of them. Some special videos appear on YouTube. Other special videos appear on Facebook. And then you've got both of them for this video that you can then share with people. So post some comments. Give me some liking love at Facebook and YouTube. Facebook is really taking off. YouTube needs some more love. We're at 110 subscribers. The next big threshold is 500 and then 1,000. So if you know someone that enjoys leadership and just hearing guys and gals and people talking about how to improve themselves, we're the place for you. So that's enough of that. So Jacob, when I read your bio, and I'd thrown out to people, hey, who wants to be on my show? And you responded, and I read your stuff, and it was cool. But tell me, and we talked about this a little, you had the opportunity to build and sell your own social network. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, so years ago, a few things kind of came together, and what it was for me was I wanted to make a social network for summer camps. And I happened to just be sitting at GoDaddy the day that .camp became available. It just was, coincidence. I'm like, okay, I got to try type in something. And I grew up in a Jewish summer camp. And I was a counselor once at a Jewish summer camp. And for a couple summers. And so I ended up buying this domain, Jew.camp. And I researched all the different softwares out there to have my own network. And I learned all about, I ended up leaning into a software called BuddyPress that is based off of WordPress because it is, the core of it is free. It's definitely a huge learning curve, but I just kind of went through it. And so I tried it a few different iterations. And the first one was a social network for camp counselors. And most camp counselors are busy working at camp and their directors don't really want to completely support them being on computers or anything.
Sure.
So that at a different point,
went over huge. You're telling me it was just a raging success.
It was a big flop. It was, it was hundreds of conversations, thousands of emails, and very, very mild interest. There was a lot of support, but it wasn't a thing people could show up for because there was. The only need, the ideal was great, but the need wasn't there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I switched it to for things for Jewish organizational leaders because, the core tenets of a social network are features and the rest of it's kind of matching the language and the people. And I was able to bring more people online with that, but it really wasn't much of anything. And so I couldn't fund it. I had to shut it down. But then an Israeli group wanted to make the same thing, a social network for Jewish organizations and Jewish professionals worldwide. And I had more than halfway solved a lot of their problems. And so, so I sold them the idea and the consulting to get started, and I got some equity in their company. And we went through a couple of beta launches, but it just never, it dissolved before it was a name that would ever hit anyone's ears. I was the youngest guy in the group.
But what's cool is that you were out there doing something, trying something, and you didn't say, okay, I've got to get it all figured out first. I got this idea. I think I can make it work. Let's go attack it. And you jumped on it. I mean, you surely had naysayers the whole time.
Every step.
And how did you overcome those naysayers and keep yourself positive?
So the first sets of naysayers in those first couple of years, one thing that I got was lovingly that, you know, all your best friends and your family sometimes are not going to be your customers for an idea. So if it doesn't match, you're not really talking to someone you're trying to sell to. So if I can't pitch that idea, that's fine. You know, it's the same as talking about dinner or something. Like we're family, or, you know, you love each other. You're going to give us a hard time and try to get the best out of each other, but we're just doing something different. So then the next part was talking to some of these different communities and people I knew in leadership positions, and trying to match, like, hear that what I was showing up with made no sense or wasn't a fit, and trying to get where we could be a fit or have a better conversation or starting point. Because for me, the real conversation I was trying to sell was, we can make technology do what we want it to do. So, like, how are conversations existing offline? How can we bring them online so that Facebook doesn't own them? And that was kind of where I was coming from.
COVID. So you created COVID to force us all online for a year? Is this what you're telling me?
Well, my chemistry skills aren't great.
Okay.
But
I don't think it's a great chemistry skills. So there you go.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So tell us about salad grapes. And I've got to get the picture up here because this is just like super cool. Zesty, bite-sized cucumbers. Oh, my.
Yeah, salad grapes.
And I probably make it bigger. So tell us the inspiration, how you came up with this, what the deal is.
So I've been married for 6 years now, and my wife actually kind of taught me how to garden back when we had an apartment. She was like one of the leaders in the apartment garden plot, but we kept having this timing in which our kids kept being born at the end of the summer and in the fall. And so she wouldn't harvest. And so I'd learn a lot by being in there. She grew up in a gardening family. I didn't really so much. And so then we moved into a house, and just kind of like as a dad hobbyist, I really got into gardening. And so in 2019, we had a really great year in our front yard. And so going into 2020, we got everything ready in February. And like March 1st, I was putting seeds in the ground, seeds in the container. Our kids they're kids, so they're picky eaters. So it was all about cucumbers and tomatoes. So I was growing cucumbers, normal cucumbers and tomatoes, and mostly like cherry tomatoes. And because of COVID, I had so much time to just be in the garden with my kids. So I really was focused on it, and we had a super fruitful year. And then I was like, well, time for a second round of crops, because a bunch of my cucumbers were done and the vines were dying out. And so I went to the store, and I saw a seed package for what are called cucamelons. It said Mexican sour gherkin. The whole thing is not a lot of people know this vegetable. It's a tiny cucumber. It grows very just like a cucumber, just only tinier. Cucumbers can have kind of a thick vine that's almost as thick as my thumb and fully grown. These vines are not even as big as my pinky. And we tried growing them, and it was abundantly successful. And I had a lot of experiences with cucumbers and growing them, and we had a good year, and it was a lot of focus, but there was something that it was very easy. But then I couldn't find a lot of information about it. There were just a handful of YouTube videos. And the funny thing is people would only have a handful, and they'd say they're just eating them all up. And then sometimes on farmers' message boards, people will say, yeah, when we start growing those, all the neighborhood kids line up and pick them before we can get to them. And so I put together an information product, and I bought a lot of seeds to resell because I want people to grow these. And now
Wow.
we got more than a dozen plants growing in the front yard. I just planted a bunch along my fence line. And so we're like, it's raining outside, or maybe I'd have pictures to take you outside, but I just had my first kind of rounds of fruits this year.
Oh, wait here. Let me kill this and get it to
Surprise,
and this is
surprise.
what happens when you don't have a producer. Okay, hold those up again. Very cool. Now, and the skin of those is like a grape.
Yeah, I mean the texture of it, absolutely. It's a grape. You eat the skin, whereas some cucumbers you may want to just peel them right away.
Right.
These, it's very eatable, and a lot of people say it's got that, I don't know what the word would be, but it's like a ribbing or something where it looks like a watermelon in the two tones of the green. And so this is pretty exciting. I had to put a net over them. I would have had more fruits, but the birds started getting to them. I didn't have that problem with this plant last year. But I also I jumped into it. I did not know what this plant was 365 days ago. I had no idea. But we had so much and so much to eat last year that but we didn't get any chance to share with anyone because nobody was by our house. And frankly, my daughter loves them. So that's why we call them salad grapes. She hates all vegetables, but she'll call them salad grapes. And we thought, since there's, a couple of nicknames and everything, that we might as well make up our own nickname and lean into the branding game.
Very cool. So do you sell the seed? You're selling quality seeds. Okay.
Yeah, seeds and information.
So are the seeds for these genetically modified, or is this like a normal seed, organic? What's the story on that?
They're all non-GMO, and they're all grown in the United States. I reached out, and there's a couple of there's actually a lot of places you can buy seeds for them, which is very strange for me, in that I have only met 2 people who knew of the fruit prior to my introduction of it. So I'm getting the seeds, and there was this one supplier who had this amazing price, and I decided to really just grill them about it. And then they told me that their seeds came from China, and they couldn't guarantee if they were GMO or non-GMO. And
well, yeah, we know that they are non-GMO at that point.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm just starting in the game. My big dream is to eventually hire a farm to be growing these, and then to have salad grapes be like packaged little cucamelons and cherry tomatoes. You just buy them at 7-Eleven or the airport, as a little snack.
Kind of like gas station sushi, but more nutritious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The skin is how you know it's not dirty. It's been protected from the elements of the gas station.
Yeah, that is just amazing. I know we used to have gardens that were like a quarter of an acre when we lived in the country. Never saw these, never heard these. We did garden boxes. We've done all kinds of gardening over the years. Never heard of these.
Yeah.
But
so I want to popularize them. Jacob Cucamelon seed.
The Jacob Cucamelon seed. So do you see this as a viable hobby to turn into a business? Where do you see this going?
I want to figure out I want to turn this into a product business. So I want to figure out if it's this space is like an information product for gardening, and it might be bigger than just cucamelons. But I do kind of actually want to build this. The vision is to hire in the next few years to just build awareness, whether or not I'm selling a bunch of seeds, build the awareness, have people have a certain desire, hire farmers to do it, and then sell it at the high premium to places, to fancy grocery stores and fancy grocery store customers, and then sell that company.
I mean, at $100 a pound, if you get good at this, as my daughter would say, you could make bank and kind of sit back and chuckle.
Yeah, as soon as though we get that second shipment, that price is we'll mess up the price discovery and it'll be a lot less. But that's fine. Anything more than the
So
average cucumber is a good return.
absolutely. So you bill yourself as, and I'm looking at your LinkedIn, original thinker, producer, entrepreneur, writer. So what have you written?
I wrote a book on cucamelons. I got two
Okay.
kids books I'm going to put out this summer by Father's Day, hopefully. One is about a kid trying to find the internet with their mom, and they go in through the Wi-Fi, and then they go through the switching station, and eventually end up at their favorite YouTuber's house. And another one's about dogs and cats who are introverts and extroverts, kind of learning to live with each other. For my WordPress business, I'm about to put out a book on WordPress. They're always like how-to guides, and they're very technical and boring. And it's just business owners need a way to have the language to talk to people that they hire about WordPress and like kind of conceptually think about that software. That I think will be a better angle. And I write articles on Times of Israel where I try to be completely original. My most recent one was thinking about if there'd be a Passover Seder in outer space.
Oh,
In the near future.
okay.
You know, because
Wouldn't there be? Why would there not be?
Absolutely. I mean, especially because they say there's going to be a space hotel by the end of the 2020s. And so I was in Vegas a couple years ago, and it was right before Passover, and the buffet said, like, we will have a kosher for Passover line. So Passover spending, we already know, big business, right? So it only lines up. The only thing to figure out is how to keep the crumbs from ruining the space instruments floating in space from the matzah. But I had this other, my real perspective and argument was that essentially certain Judaisms and groups of Jews try to control this narrative of who are Jews, what's Jewish civilization. And there's this perspective that astronauts get called the overview effect when they're looking down on planet Earth. They just have this massively inclusive vision and sense of self and sense of the world and other people. And then I think the Passover Seder is really a vehicle to get that kind of perspective. It's like much more about being inclusive and seeing a big picture history and not trying to be so, this is us and we're not everyone else and that kind of stuff.
I think a lot of people suffer from this is us and we're not everyone else. I mean, there's definite differences between different people groups to a certain extent, but shouldn't we focus a little bit more on what makes us the same and then respect what makes us all different? You're a social media guy. I have this theory that social media has made people brazenly brave to say things that they would never say to people's faces.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's a certain numbness to how we'll create our own content and deliver it to people because we're just in this tunnel of social media and are not in control of what we're consuming and how we're thinking about it, not even taking a second to react to it. It's like the amount of time there's this great joke that Marshall McLuhan always brings up, but it's like an anecdote because it's totally true, where George Washington says to Thomas Jefferson, "We haven't heard from Ben Franklin in France this year. Should we send him a letter?" Like, there's more time. People are used to, we've spent millions of years having so much more time to even deal with the most serious conversations. And even when they're critical, even when we need to have this conversation today because of what's happening outside right now, people still took more time to react, and we don't. And I don't know. I think about that all the time because I'm raising kids and like we let them do iPad games and stuff. But I wonder more once it gets the interactive, social media of it all, video games where they're yelling at each other.
I'm a 55-year-old guy. I have no problem admitting that to people. And I'll tell you, before cell phones, Do you want to know what were emergencies?
What?
Emergencies.
Mm-hmm.
Now everything is an emergency. What used to be an annoyance is now an emergency. What people used to sometimes say, okay, we need to fix this, has taken off like a rocket ship. Surely you've seen that in your own business where something you may get feedback and you're like, okay, I'll get that fixed. It's not a big deal. But to someone else, it's like, it's just raising them. And it's like, dude, what did you do before instant messaging?
Yeah. I made the mistake a few times where I would let people get my personal number when dealing with their company's websites. And that was the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. And there's a few people in my life where we've become friends. So I just have a quick line, which is like, you can never text me a question about your website ever. I have an email address for this, and you can text me to say I need to get on the phone. We're having an emergency because you're my bud. But that's the only place. It's like, and you have to, and you have to know if it's an emergency.
It has to be an emergency.
It has to be an emergency. Otherwise, the software takes care of most of that other stuff. Or
so how does the software business, the WordPress business, meld with the Cucamelon business?
Separate entities.
Totally separate. No leveraging.
The only thing is from one client in the last year, he had a particular way that they ran their website, and they use Gravity Forms to sell their services. And I was going to use a different e-commerce engine, but I realized right now I'm just selling kind of one thing, and there's kind of one bump to it. So I made it more simplistic, and I actually went with their solution and how we had it set up over there, as opposed to how I would do it in a different way, kind of coming to it newly for someone. So I don't know. I guess I learned a lot from that first business for the second one. I have a lot of good clients. All my clients in my WordPress business are all business owners. So they teach me a lot, and they're all independent business owners. And so they teach me a lot. I learned from them about like branding and how they kind of set up their proposition, because I am my own producer for the Cucamelon idea and what that is.
So tell us a little bit about the branding. What have you learned about branding?
Yeah, to be succinct and be authentic, but not to be too outside the box. It's okay to have it's okay and even important to kind of have things that are easy or cliche to kind of touch upon, with the kind of catchphrase that we're going for, which is zesty bite-sized cucumbers. It workshopped it down from something that was much longer and wordier. But I think the kind of bet and fun that I'm trying to have, at least with Salad Grapes, is the branding game of putting something that's out there, but it just doesn't like land right. Like, wait, Salad Grapes. Oh yeah, wait, what? What is that? I think I know what that is. Maybe they don't have that at the grocery store. This isn't a grape.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it'll stand out.
But is it more of a grape or is it more of a cucumber?
It's absolutely a cucumber.
Okay.
It's just grape sized.
It's just grape sized.
Mm-hmm.
And grape sized cucumbers just doesn't have a thrill to it.
Yeah. Right. There's cherry tomatoes, grape tomatoes.
Yeah.
The name I've heard most people hear it by is Mexican sour gherkin. I don't like that name only because gherkins have a particular texture and these do not. They're very smooth on the outside. Gherkins are bumpier in general. And they're just, I don't know. They're just, the cucamelons are much further on on the species side further away than the gherkins than the name would suggest. So I think it's misleading. Some of the good Spanish names are good though.
So you talk a lot about looking at your own experiences and leveraging them into other experiences. So how has your past prepared you for salad grapes?
Oh, yeah, good question. So I worked at summer camp, and there was 2-3 summers where I worked and had counselors working underneath me. And one of those summers, our director, Jeff Mankiewicz, he brought in someone from the Peter Drucker Institute and was talking to us very much about management as actually really like as an ethical practice. Like you want to be effective because being effective and efficient is the right thing to do because you care about what you're doing. That was part of, I mean, there was a lot of ideas there, but that was a big one that resonated with me. And I still have the book we took away from that. And so that helped me in a lot of ways, particularly learning about like Peter Drucker and a lot of ideas about management and management as like a scientific study almost, or as a liberal arts practice that you can really talk about, hone in on, and shape. It was something that it brought me into the WordPress world a little bit and brought me into a place where I grew I worked for a firm and I worked for some other companies doing WordPress work, and that leadership skills and understanding management kind of built me up there. So out of that, I was around a lot of businesses and just seeing the content, seeing how they set up, getting their customers, seeing how they service their customers, seeing the operations. At one point, I worked for a juice company here in Austin when they were a startup, and they do juice smoothies. They sell through the internet. They sell through a bunch of in stores now. And so I learned a lot about content and packaging from him, but they were paying me to learn how to do the software stuff, which then cascaded me to my next job and learning and understanding how to use BuddyPress so that I could go and work in a BuddyPress firm and have this idea for a social network. So then it's like, by the time I'm ready to, I want to tell people about cucamelon seeds and I want to sell them. Really the hardest part was my writing, putting together that site, having all the e-commerce there, directing traffic there, being able to have conversations with other people to get their critical feedback on my content, and like having a place to register that has been like a scaffold of all my experiences so far. So the fact that like it's just it's like the first year I'm doing this, and it's just kind of wherever it's at right now. I've shipped to like a half dozen states. We're still at just around 100 customers. It's like, it's the beginning of a big journey. I am feeding my kids with the cucamelons that I'm growing, but the cucamelon seeds and information I'm selling, I'm just trying to make some extra cash right now and then build the awareness.
Well, and what you just said, I think is something that I think it's profound. I'm going to repeat it back. And you don't even realize it. And I think so many people miss it. You ready? It's the beginning of a big journey. It's the beginning of a big journey. People don't realize that what they're doing when they try something should be the beginning of a big journey. They look at, and I don't even know why I'm going to use this as an example, but you look at the Kardashians. Okay, it's like in my world, at least, and I'm not like in their world, but in my world, it went from unknown to boom, they were everywhere. But you know what? There was a beginning of what became a big journey where they were doing all kinds of stuff, I'm sure, that people didn't, growingly larger groups of people found out about. Facebook used to be the Facebook for college students. I remember reading an article, I think it was in Fortune magazine, when Facebook was first coming out, and they were interviewing Zucker. Okay. or Zuckerberg. They were interviewing him, and they were talking about this young CEO. And when he hands them his card, it says CEO bitch on it because it was just like, hey, it was the beginning of a big journey,
Right.
and he didn't know how big it was going. If he says he knew how big it was going to get, I call bullshit.
Right.
Nobody
Yeah.
could. So what you're talking about is that the I want to call them the right thing. Salad grapes, I wrote down, are the beginning of a big journey. Don't forget that, and tell your kids that.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me that and reflecting that back. Yeah, and the process of learning to garden all these years through my wife, through the last few years of wanting to like really get vegetables just to eat and enjoy, and then really overdo that. Like, yeah, each year the plants teach you that it's going to be a long season. The thing that really hit me back this year was I was planning on selling sprouts, lots and lots of sprouts. I had everything ready, and then we had an epic snowstorm here in Texas. Just epic. It was historical, and it was fine. I grew them inside. I had a heating pad, and then when the storm broke, I took them outside, and the weather that day in a Texas fashion jumped to 85 degrees and killed all the plants. It was just like too much of a temperature jump. And
wow.
Just learning, beginning of a journey. Also, it turns out I wouldn't, there might be other licensing I'd have to sell that. So, it's just all part of a journey. Yeah. I want to get somewhere really big, and it's just one brick at a time, one conversation at a time, and eventually hire people, scale it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So shockingly, we have gone 32 and a half minutes on a 30-minute show.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. But now this is the part where I throw it over to you because you've been answering my questions. Now I want you to speak directly to the audience that's here, and the audience that'll come back on the replay and watch it later. I want you to talk to them about what you just said. It's the beginning of a big journey.
There's kind of really only this moment, and if you take a deep breath and look around, you'll kind of see that bugs float around and they're kind of looking for pollen and moving around, and we're doing the same thing, and there's no reason to speed up. It's just be where you are. Maybe right now the fruit's not budded yet, or it's just early on and nobody agrees with you that it makes any sense, and you've eaten all the fruit that you've grown, so you're only talking to them about it. But there's more time. There's always more time. Life is a big, long conversation. The only asset in a way that we really have is ourselves and the relationships we have. And then it's just kind of what you're doing. And it's a long journey. It's a long journey because it's the process that's really fun. Like there's goals, there's places I want to be. And whenever I get there, there's something else that I see where I want to go. And, people will be critical, and that is okay. And it's good. And you should listen to all the criticism and decide whether or not you care for it or whether or not it's going to shape you to be better. And then just keep moving forward.
Awesome. Jacob, thank you again for being my guest today. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise.
You've reminded me of something that it's the beginning of a big journey. That is going to be echoing, I think, in my head most of the weekend. So appreciate you, man. Glad to have you on today.
Yeah. Have a wonderful weekend. Best to you.
You too. Everyone, that's Litvak Leadership Live for this Friday. We'll be back next week with another guest talking about